big ball. Going for the big shot, and he hits it.
That's batted into the air, intercepted, and the Bears are going to win it.
There is a lot to discuss if you are a Bears reporter, much like we are, because over the last, what is it, dude? I want to say like 72 to 96 hours, especially on Sunday afternoon. It hasn't necessarily been, I guess, the most pleasant of weeks for the Bears, even though they're technically 1-1 out of the bye week. Welcome into the Halas Beat. Steve, Letizia, Usayd, Koshul here. Check us out on Twitter at CFC Bears, at Halas Beat, and at Usayd Koshul. Steve, I don't know about you, but there's been a lot of, I guess, like action and reaction from this fan base. We're going to get into a lot today. I got to ask, though, man, how's everything going so far?
Yeah, everything's going pretty good. I've been trying to stay off Twitter a little bit just because it does get a little frustrating to see, because, you know, coming off a 4-game win streak, vibes were high. When Bears fans were talking Super Bowl, and then we lose one game, and all of a sudden the sky's falling, and we need a new quarterback, all this different stuff. So, despite that, I think, there was a little bit of overreaction. It's funny because I was actually watching the game last week outside my normal, just living room. I was at Potawatomi in Milwaukee watching the game with some friends. The Bears game was on the big TV, but a whole bunch of other games were going on. So I was watching it all, and I was like, okay, we lost, but I thought, it wasn't that bad. And then I get on Twitter, and it was like, oh my God, the sky is falling. So it's funny to see kind of the instant reactions, and then everyone kind of calmed down through the week. And I think we're at a point where everyone's kind of calmed down and just kind of ready for the Bengals game.
Yeah, I feel like, like the game for me is in the rearview mirror at this point. I should mention it was in the rearview mirror like the moment that it ended. But the big thing here is this, right? The Bears go out on Wednesday morning. They sign Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, a player that obviously is very notorious for not necessarily being well liked among this fan base because of the Javon Williams and the Tariq Cohen incident from the last time this team had a young quarterback plus a offensive head coach. But I think you look at this and you kind of say, well, this is the classic, like, hey, so one of the coaches in the building was with you at another place at one point, so we're going to bring you in because you're a guy that fits our system, which I think, let's just be honest about something, right? Unless you want Nick McLeod and whoever else was out there this past Sunday starting for the Bears at cornerback, I mean, your next best option in the secondary is going to be Gardner-Johnson, regardless of what the antics are here.
The Bears needed to make a move at the cornerback position. Like that's been coming for a few weeks now. It's been obvious for a few weeks now. And I thought, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, like you said, he's got his issues on the field in terms of his like temperament, but he's a solid player and he knows the system. Like you said, like you don't have to bring a guy off the street who's going to have to learn or do anything like that. I thought it was a great move just for that reason. I mean, he's not going to come in and change your defense, but he's going to be a warm body you can throw out there, and he's a professional, and he's gonna do his job. And like I said, the Bears, they've needed a cornerback for a few weeks now. Like it was, we were kind of just waiting to see what they were going to do, and I like this move a hell of a lot more than trading a pick for a guy who probably isn't going to be much better than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, anyone you're trading for has flaws by default because teams don't trade players who are really, really good. They trade players who don't fit their scheme or have their, maybe just aren't very good or just have other issues. So rather than trade a fifth or sixth round pick for a guy, you get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson off the street. He knows the scheme. He's a solid player. I think it was the right move. The Bears, let's be honest, the Bears aren't winning a Super Bowl this year. If they did have Super Bowl aspirations, maybe you could trade a pick for maybe a better player. But they just need kind of a stopgap right now. I think that's what Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is, but I think he's probably the best case scenario stopgap you can get at this point of the season.
Okay, you brought up a really good point here because I don't know, like I don't really buy into some of these accounts on Twitter about this player's in the market. Like I'm pretty sure it was NFL Rumors today. And I should mention, it's not our intent to diminish any of these accounts because there's a ton of information out there. I'm just saying that from my perspective and my vantage point, you kind of have to take some of these reports with a little bit of caution. I look at this entire situation and I say, well, if you're the Bears right now, who realistically are you going to bring in that is going to help sort of stabilize your secondary, quote unquote, right? Which I will be fully honest with you all. I think that there's bigger issues here with this team. And I am not a fan of trading a day 1, 2, or 3 draft pick for a cornerback, right? Like, I think that that's a stupid thing because ultimately you should be able to figure it out with some of the investments that you've made there. And with Gardner Johnson, you do get that stable veteran presence, which a little bit of a side note, he was actually with the Ravens for a week in October from October 7th to 14th. So, way to assign him after the, after the Ravens game. Should have been before, but whatever. So, the whole point is this, just looping back to your point about you're not going to trade, a draft pick for a solid corner. I think you're entirely right because it's like at this point, if I'm trading a draft pick, if I'm Ryan Poles and I'm Ben Johnson, I'm looking at this and saying the only position that I am giving up a draft pick for is a pass rusher. And even that, I think it has to depend on like who that pass rusher is and what their specific demands are going to be in terms of, is this a player that's on an expiring contract? Is this a player that is going to be someone that's is gonna go ahead and is just kind of like a half game season rental type thing? Is this someone that isn't really getting reps on another team, is like 26, 27 years old, a young guy that the Bears believe can be productive, that they're willing to stake their claim in?
Yeah, and look at it this way as well. I mean, cornerback is only a need because of injury. It's not a need based on talent. I mean, the Bears have 3 talented corners in Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon, and Tyreek Stevenson. The problem is all 3 of those guys are injured. So, like, you're not going to make a trade for a guy who's on a long-term contract who's pretty good because next year you hope you have all 3 of those guys back. So it's not a long-term need, it's a short-term need. So trading a pick for that doesn't make sense to me. Like you said, trading a pick for a pass rusher, now that could make sense given if it's the right player at the right time. Maybe a guy, a guy who's signed beyond this year, who can help you immediately, but also help you down the road. That makes a little bit more sense to me, like you said. I know Tariq Woolen's name has been thrown around at the cornerback position. Maybe that happens with the Bears, but I don't see it happening because ideally, like I said, next year you have your 3 cornerbacks in place. You just need some depth there. So this is a good short-term solution, and there really isn't any need to panic there long-term.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point. It's interesting. I totally forgot that the trade deadline was next week on Tuesday, November 4th. And that really gets me thinking because, again, I forgot to put in our outline for this episode. But this trade deadline is going to be one that's interesting because obviously we've seen Ryan Poles. He likes to be active during the trade deadline. You look at Chase Claypool. You look at Montez Sweat. He's a fan of these, in-season trades and whatnot. But I think, the big thing with Ryan is that when it comes to some of the in-season trades he's making, he's not trading for a guy that, is going to be a rotational player on this team. He's trading for a guy that he believes can be a long-term piece and starter. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, okay? I don't think Cincinnati moves on from Trey Hendrickson. I don't see the Bears trading for a edge rusher that's going to help this team go from being good to being great. I'm in the camp that, listen, if you're going to get an edge rusher, you're better off waiting till April's draft because you will have a lot more flexibility there rather than, coughing up a pick for a player that, you probably is not going to go ahead and is not going to be a stabilizing force for you, which I should also mention this, that if you're going to go ahead and you're going to trade for a star pass rusher like a Trey Hendrickson, the price is going to be pretty rich. And I just don't think he gets moved because he's got his contract extension and he's not going to be moved for anything less than 2-1s. And given the current state of this team, I would say that the 2-1s, even though they are complete unknowns for 26 and 27. Like, you don't know who's going to be in that draft class. That they are just more valuable than trading for a guy like Hendrickson.
Completely agree. I wouldn't do it if I was, Ryan Poles. That doesn't mean Ryan Poles isn't going to do it, because that's, like you said, he likes to be active at this time of the year. But I don't like to do it for a lot of reasons, and it's a lot of the same reasons I didn't want to trade for a corner. It's, first of all, when you're making trades at the trade deadline, it's usually at a premium, because there's a lot of, teams that are Super Bowl contenders who are maybe one player away, and they're like, hey, if we get this guy, we could win a Super Bowl. So they're willing to give up a little bit more to get that guy. The Bears are not in that situation. Let's just be honest. The Bears are not a player away from winning a Super Bowl. So you could make a trade potentially in the offseason as well, and I think you can get a similar type player that you could get now, but maybe for lesser draft capital. And just so that's reason one. And then also, like I said, the Bears just aren't a player away from winning a Super Bowl. Keep your draft picks, just build through the draft. We've seen that at the quarterback position. I mean, cornerback was a position they actually did have solid depth, but they ran through it quickly. They don't have great depth, just kind of across the board. So you need those third, fourth, fifth round picks to kind of help build the depth of this team. So I don't like trading them. And trading for a guy like, Hendrickson or like Max Crosby's name's been thrown out there, it's just going to be way too much to give up to where the Bears are at this time. I think they need to keep those first rounders and really get their own Trey Hendrickson or get their own Max Crosby, someone like that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Ruben Bain somehow from Miami. If the Bears can find a way to get him, they'll be set. But there's a lot of different options to improve your pass rush. It's just unfortunately going to be in the offseason, not right now.
Yeah, and another guy that's been thrown out there is New York Giants pass rusher Kayvon Thibodeau, who was in the same draft class as Justin Fields, and the Giants selected him with the 5th overall pick in 2021. Bit of a side note here as we're talking about the draft guys. My October mock draft is going to be releasing on Friday, October 31st. A little bit of a Halloween treat for you all there. There's a lot of, interesting selections in there, so check that out. That'll be live on the Bear Report website at 8 a.m. on Friday morning. But see, the other part of this thing is this, right? Is it's like we're sitting here saying, okay, the Bears they shouldn't acquire anybody. The second half of this is, hey, is there anyone on this roster that you would currently move? I don't think Cole Kmet's going anywhere because his contract does not match production. And quite frankly, the Bears are, regardless of what the stats say right now, they like a stabilizing presence such as Cole Kmet in the run game. Teams are probably not going to trade for a run-first blocking tight end and pay, a premium price for it, especially given his $11.6 million that he's making this year. The other big guy that's been floated around since it seems like, June or July, or since the Bears selected Luther Burden, is DJ Moore. Now that contract is obviously massive because it's like the 4-year, $110 million deal. This is the second or the first real year of that contract, I believe. I believe that contract starts next year. I don't necessarily think that the Bears move on from DJ Moore either, because he's doing a lot of things right now that are going unnoticed, despite the fact that he's averaging just 50 yards a catch or 50 yards per game.
Yeah, the stats aren't necessarily there for DJ Moore, but I wouldn't trade him either. I think, like you said, he's doing the little things. He's blocking well. He's asked to do a lot of just clear outs to clear space underneath for other guys. He's blocking in the screen game. He's doing a lot of the other stuff that you don't always see. And also, the Bears just need, you need these weapons if you want to have a sustainable offense. And right now, I like Luther Burden as well, but so far he has not done really anything to say that DJ Moore is expendable. I want to see if Luther Burden starts really stepping up and having big games and making big plays, then you could maybe start thinking about trading DJ Moore in the offseason. But I'm not going to do that just as a theoretical, just because we have theoretically a better or similar player behind him. I need to see it before I move on from DJ Moore. So far, we haven't really seen it. And I'm not saying that's Luther Burden's fault. The Bears just have a lot of mouths to feed, so he might just not be getting his chance. But also, like I said, I'm not moving on from him until I see that for sure. So I'm keeping DJ Moore. And in terms of like other guys you would trade, like Cole Kmet, you made a good point. I don't think Cole Kmet's being traded just because of his contract and his ability there. And I don't know if there's really anyone else that the Bears would want to give up and then other teams would actually want. Usually if you trade in a guy in the Bears situation, it's going to be a veteran who's maybe on the last year of his deal. He's not going to be here next year. Let's see if we can get something for him. I don't really see anyone who kind of fits that bill. I mean, Cole Kmet and DJ Moore are the only two guys I could even see trading. And DJ Moore, I don't think the Bears want to trade, and I don't think anyone wants to trade for Cole Kmet. So I don't see it happening this year.
Yeah, you see, it's amazing how 3 years ago when... Okay, I go back to like the last, 5 to 7 years, right? Because this team's had 3 rookie quarterbacks over an 8-year span at this point. I go back to the fact of, when this team, like you look at the receiving corps that Trubisky had his first 2 years, right? You look at what Fields had his first 2 years. You look at what Caleb has. I do believe that the circumstances in Chicago are different if you take this current receiving corps, with Zacchaeus included, the top 4 guys, and you give them to any of the other 2 quarterbacks. The story then ultimately ends up being different. Now, how massively different is obviously up for debate, but that's what I fully believe. Because I take this current offensive core over a core that included Robinson, Gabriel, Anthony Miller, Trey Burton as well. Obviously, there was the Darnell Mooney years, But I think the point I'm making here is this, is that it's interesting because you have a fan base that has for so long said, well, the issue is that the quarterback doesn't have weapons. The quarterback doesn't have weapons. We need to go ahead. We need to get the quarterback weapons. Now it's like you're stacking weapons. So why are we going to go ahead and why do we all of a sudden want to advocate for trading this guy away? When in reality, maybe this is just more so a thing of like, hey, DJ's not where he needs to be because he's literally starting over again for like the umpteen time in his career. But moving on from the offense here in the trade deadline, dude, I think I gotta ask you, okay, the sheriff seems to be back in town, all right, with Austin Booker going ahead and finally being activated off injured reserve. I mean, they open up the 3-week window for him coming out of the bye week. Now I think the question becomes, can he finally give this unit, this pass rush unit, a little bit of a boost that they've been seeking? And then does that possibly open things up to allow a guy like a Dayo Odeyingbo to play inside and play defensive tackle if needed?
Man, I sure hope so. I guess is the answer to that. I mean, the Bears desperately need some pass rush. And it does sound like, Austin Booker's coming back here. I do think he will make a difference. Is he going to come in and be, a top-tier pass rusher? No, but I think he will make a difference in the pass rush because I think he gives defenses a different look than what the other players on the Bears have. Montez Sweat, Dayo Odeyingbo, even Dominic Robinson before he got hurt. All bigger, more power rushers. And I think Austin Booker gives you a little bit more speed off the edge, can thread the edge and can bend around the corner a little bit more than those guys can. So I think just giving offenses a different look, offensive tackles a different look from the Bears is going to help that. And to your point that you said, I think it's going to help it because it's going to allow Dayo Odeyingbo to move inside on passing downs to kind of get 4 better pass rushers on the field at the same time. And I think when they signed Dayo, I watching him on the Colts, I was like, most of his good pass rushers are coming from the inside. So that's kind of where I think he's going to end up long term, and I think that's where he's going to be most effective. I still don't think he's going to live up to the contract they gave him, unfortunately. But I think that's his best bet, and that's the Bears' best bet to get kind of some production out of him. And I think Dennis Allen also mentioned that as well, that they want to play him inside. They just haven't really had the opportunity because with Austin Booker's injury and some other ineffectiveness, they've had to play him off the edge pretty much exclusively. So now with another body, hopefully that allows them to be a little bit more unpredictable, allows them to move guys around a little bit, maybe bring different packages, different blitz packages, stuff like that. And Austin Booker's a guy who's maybe a little bit more athletic. You can drop him into coverage and bring an exotic blitz. That's not really something you can do with Dayo or Montez Sweat. So it gives you just a little bit Dennis Allen a few more options. So I think it is going to help. I don't know if it's going to help enough to where the pass rush is going to be where it needs to be.
Well, and from Dennis Allen's perspective, when he was talking to the media today at Halas Hall, he said, I think the biggest thing holding any of us back in terms of edge rushing is that we've got to get some of these games where we can get the score in a position where they're having to throw every down. It's much harder to rush the passer when you're in the run play action downs versus when they're in drop back mode. I think what he's basically alluding to is that it's like, listen, maybe the offense is doing a damn good job in terms of putting points up on the board, but we as a unit also have to be better as a team in terms of making sure that the score is to a point where teams are basically being forced to have to throw the ball because the Bears are so far ahead. So it's essentially like, let's make sure that the scoreboard reflects playing an opponent that has to now abandon the run because they're trying to do whatever is needed to get back into the game. And then eventually what will happen is the exotic blitzes and all that pass rush is eventually going to come to fruition, which to me, I think is a really good strategy. But also I think from my perspective, you can't really rely on this offense right now, if you're in Dennis Allen's chair, to blow the doors off the opposing defense either.
And along those lines, with kind of what Dennis had said, the score, obviously, if the Bears offense puts up more points, the opposing offense is going to have to throw the ball more. But also, with that is the Bears defense needs to do a better job on first and second down and get offenses into third and longs, because offenses are not facing many 3rd and 7+. They're facing 3rd and 2, and when it's 3rd and 2, yeah, you do have to play the run, both the run and the pass. But if it's 3rd and 8, you can kind of then pin your head back and rush the passer. So I think stopping the run and stopping those quick passes on first and second down is another way. And I don't know why Dennis Allen didn't mention that, is another way to get offenses into obvious passing downs. So it's a team effort for sure. The offense is partly responsible, but the defense also takes some accountability as well on those first and second downs. They're getting gashed against the run. They're giving up big plays on first and second down. You have to make a stop. The Bears can't always be relying on turnovers to make defensive stops. You have to win on first down, get them in obvious passing situations, and then when you do get them in obvious passing situations, you have to be able to rush the passer. And in those situations, in those obvious passing situations, the Bears pass rush has not been good enough. It's not just one guy or one side of the ball. It's everything right now that is leading to the lack of pass rush.
And again, I should mention that the pass rush up did take a slight hit with Shamar Turner going down with the ACL injury. So this is a unit that, obviously the front seven, because of the communication factor that it plays, it does take a lot of time to gel. And they really haven't had that sort of time to gel as much as people want between training camp and then the first 7 to 8 games. But, there's a ton of sort of, I guess, like you hope that this team is able to go ahead and turn it around. And I think part of that sort of turnaround on the defense is getting this pass rush going. But I will say that this Ravens game proved that just because your pass rush gets going, or you could figure out the pass rush if you still got holes in your secondary, that doesn't necessarily mean that you've figured it out. Like, I think it's going to take some additional time. I mean, hopefully this team figures it out by Thanksgiving / first week of December, and they're still in the hunt for the playoffs, which I know Monday Night Football with the Commanders playing the Chiefs, we got our first the Bears are in the hunt graphic of the season. So that is always, I guess, an exciting time, because that tweet, for some reason, every year ends up going viral, where it's like, hey, the Bears are in the hunt.
Yeah, it's always nice to see that graphic. For so many years, the Bears were not in the hunt and not even making the graphic like in week 8 or 9. And you're like, come on. But the last couple of years we've been there. So it is good to see. But yeah, I think the pass rush is not going to be fixed overnight. It's not going. I mean, Austin Booker's not going to come and fix it. It's going to be this offseason's prerogative to fix that pass rush, and they'll have some opportunities to do that. The draft, free agency, whatever it may be. But yeah, we'll see.
Getting away from the defense here, there's been a ton of things that we have discussed. I mean, I seriously wonder these last two games, is this offense in a funk, or is it just the fact that this offense hasn't necessarily hit its stride yet? And we're being a little bit, I guess, quote unquote, like unfair, because you got the coaches coming out and saying, well, the quarterbacks played a really good game. And this isn't going to turn into a discussion, by the way, for our listeners and our viewers about, Caleb Williams' performance, because we've said he needs to be better. I seriously think that this offense just has not hit its stride and just played like two pretty tough, scrappy opponents. And yeah, I think the Saints are a little bit, tougher and scrappier than people give them credit for, because these last two games have proven that like the record just does not matter week to week.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is more, I mean, with the caveat, like you said, we're not going to get into a large discussion. We'll just say it. The quarterback needs to play a little bit better. That's out there. But I think it's just this, you need time in the offense to gel and to get to a place where everyone on the offense is comfortable doing everything. Because we've had games where the running game has looked good. We've had games where the running game looks bad. We've had games where the passing game looks good. We've had games where the passing game looks bad. We've had games where the offensive line looks good. We've had games where the offensive line looks bad. And it doesn't seem like we've had a single game where all three of those things were kind of gelling together. So we haven't really seen that yet. And to me, the biggest indicator of the offense just needs to gel a little bit more is if the Bears have turned a couple possessions that ended in a field goal into touchdowns, we win that game against the Ravens pretty easily, and we dominate those other games early in the year during that 4-game win streak. So to me, it's they're stalling out in the red zone way too much and settling for field goals, and that's just something like they're moving the ball. It's not the issue of they can't move the ball. They have a ton of 3 and outs. They're moving the ball. They're getting into position, and they're just not able to punch it in. And that comes with time, and that comes as offenses gel. A couple different, like I said, maybe even just one possession in the Ravens game ends in a touchdown instead of a field goal, and you might win that game. So to me, that's the biggest indicator to me, and I think that's just something that's gonna, hopefully get fixed soon. Yeah. So I think that's kind of where my head's at. I'm not too worried yet. We're halfway through year one of Ben Johnson, and in year one with Caleb Williams in a successful offense. And I think we need to stop looking at Drake May and Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix and all these other quarterbacks and comparing us to them, and just enjoy Caleb Williams, enjoy the ride with him, and just kind of appreciate what you have, because he's played a lot better than what people gave him credit for, especially right after that game. I saw some wild takes when I logged onto Twitter after that game about getting rid of him and stuff like that. We are far, far, far from that conversation. So just let this play out a little bit. I think by the end of the year, they'll start turning those field goal drives into touchdown drives. They'll start getting the run game and the pass game going at the same time. And we'll be in a really good shape heading into 2026.
And one of the things I want to mention is I was one of those people on Twitter saying hopefully the Bears haven't repeated the cycle. But you also, I think, need to get more out of that quarterback position, because you don't want to be on a San Francisco 49ers like trajectory where it's like you got the defense, you got the running game, you got the pieces in the passing game, you got the O-line, but your quarterback's holding you back. Like, you don't want to be on that type of trajectory, because then that means that you're going to be a good team that's contending and in the playoffs year in and year out, but you're not necessarily ever going to be the team that like gets over the hump. I will say this though, I want to focus the last couple minutes here on some of the play calls that Ben Johnson has had. I do think just, from a coach's vantage point, the play calls are really interesting, but I think that to be honest with you guys, the timing and anticipation of some of these throws by the receivers in terms of the spots they're supposed to be in, and then by Caleb Williams as well. Not necessarily there. Like the Bears, I think on that first or second drive on Sunday, they were in the red zone, and Ben Johnson pretty much called a mesh play, which is designed to, two crossing routes essentially with a spot route by the tight end, which is, hey, you just find space and settle. Those are the types of plays where it's like you're literally getting guys open. But mesh is a staple of the air raid offense. The Bears are not running air raid, but you could take mesh is a versatile enough concept to where you can take it and put it into any offense that is going to have a basic 2x2 spread package. So I think, it gets to a point where when we look at all of this, right, like the play calls are certainly there. I do think that these receivers need to be better about being in their spots. That I think is one factor. The second factor I think is this, and we look at the passing concepts, right? The concepts are layered in a sense to where it's like, short, intermediate, deep. All right. Usually, and that's receivers and tight ends combined on the short, intermediate, deep. Ben Johnson, I think, has really shown that he's willing to keep defenses on their toes and not use these tight ends in the short and intermediate passing game. Like he wants them to go ahead and run those deep crossers over the middle of the field to get the safety to bail essentially to open up that intermediate throw underneath.
Yeah, I agree. And then, to be honest, another thing that's holding back, I think, this offense is a little bit is just the left tackle position. I mean, Theo Bennett's not an NFL level left tackle, so you have that issue, and so you have to have a running back chipping, you have to have a tight end chipping or doing something. You have to use a lot of play action. You have to do a lot of rollouts to kind of hide your left tackle because he's just frankly, I mean, it's not his fault. He's an undrafted free agent. He's just frankly not an NFL caliber left tackle. So I think if you can address that somehow in the offseason, I think it allows you to open up the play calling a little bit. It allows you to open up the offense a little bit. It allows Caleb Williams to be a little bit more comfortable in the pocket. Not that he's been uncomfortable, I would say, but it does seem like when pressure does come, it comes from that left side. And that's really hard to avoid. I think one of the sacks in the Ravens game, Theo Bennett was beat, pretty badly. And if Caleb Williams had another half second, he might have found someone for a touchdown. So I think that's another thing that's kind of holding this offense back. And it's not, unfortunately, not going to be fixed this year, but you got to hope that's fixed going into next year.
Well, last point I'm going to make here, but give it another, I want to say 70 to 80 days. The debate about what this team should do in the first round, should they take a left tackle or should they take an edge rusher, I really think is going to create for a ton of interesting conversation in the spring when we do eventually get to the draft. But that's going to do it from us. Make sure you guys are following us on Twitter at CFC Bears, at Usayd Koshul, at Halas. Remember, my mock draft is live on the Bear Report website on Friday morning. Definitely check that out. There's a lot of really intriguing, I think, selections in there that are going to get you guys thinking about what the draft's going to look like or could look like and positions that the Bears could target going into next year based on where the projections sit at the end of October going into the month of November. Make sure that you give the podcast a 5-star rating and review. Give us a like, comment, subscribe on YouTube as well. Anything you guys want us to discuss, leave it in the comments below. But other than that, guys, we'll see you next week after hopefully a Bears win. Ladies and gentlemen, bear down.